Plato's theory of the forms. What are the implications of these theories for our understanding of the arts? Plato had this idea that the physical world that we see is not true reality. Instead, it is a less perfect copy or reflection of an ideal world of forms. He said that objects that we see and interact with in our physical world are merely shadows or reflections of the true forms. This will become clearer later on. True forms contain a perfect ideal of the thing it is representing. These forms transcend our ideas of space and time, beyond the physical, and are innate within us. They are non-physical forms, more real than any object that imitates them. Plato calls them the really real. A form can be seen as an essence of something, beauty, justice, or even a circle. It doesn't decay, go away, or change. Can we perceive forms? Plato posits that we cannot interact with forms directly through senses, as they don't exist in our spatial or temporal physical world. One cannot come into contact with circleness. With our mind-soul, we can perceive these forms by recognizing their imitation in our physical world, like beauty. Beauty can be reflected in the face of a loved one, or in an object like a flower. But the essence of beauty is not contained within the physical world. Rather, it is derived from another plane. Each form can be seen as a blueprint of perfection. Now, who was Plato? Plato was a playwright and a poet who became a philosopher through his many academic influences and experiences, as he was born into the Greek political and social elite. His ideas, the prominent being his theory of forms, eventually became the basis for Western philosophical tradition. Plato believed that reality is divided into two parts, the ideal and the phenomena. The phenomena are the physical world that we experience, what we see. It is a flawed echo of the perfect ideal model. The ideal is the perfect reality of existence, the spiritual realm, what we cannot see. It exists beyond the material world. Look at it like this. The world of forms is rational and unchanging. The world of physical appearances is changeable, irrational. It only has reality to the extent that it succeeds in imitating forms. The mind-soul belongs to the ideal world, the world of forms. The body and its passions are stuck in the muck of the physical, naive world. Now, undesirables such as evil does not exist in the world of forms, as they are deprivations of good and truth and reason. A broader understanding of Plato's forms can be realized in the allegory of the cave. This allegory in the Republic, the book written by Plato, explains what forms are and how everything we encounter is a representation of truth and not truth itself. Plato describes prisoners fastened to a cave wall. They have been there since birth. They know nothing else except the cave, the darkness, and the shadows that they see on the opposite wall. These shadows they are watching are representations of objects controlled by a puppeteer outside of the cave cavity, cast by a fire above. One of these prisoners escapes. The book states he was compelled to leave, an indication that he sought the truth no matter how difficult it was. As he reaches the outside, he is disorientated by first the light of the fire and then the light of the sun. This must have been traumatizing for the prisoner to experience at first, but once he adjusted to the sun, he experienced enlightenment. He sees objects like he's never seen them before, in color, in 3 dimension, in texture, in their true form. The prisoner returns to the cave to enlighten the others, but again he is disorientated, this time by the darkness. This, along with his deliberations of truth and light, only makes him look and sound crazy to the other prisoners. The prisoners cannot understand the images before them are merely shadows of objects controlled by puppeteers, who are the artists. The escaped prisoner is the philosopher king, as Plato calls him, who encounters the true forms of reality rather than just shadows projected on the wall, whose duty it is to replicate the forms of goodness, wisdom, justice as best they can. The life of the mind-soul is the life of the philosopher, who practices self-control, especially control of passions, and avoids temptations of sensuality, greed, and ambition. Plato's The Republic is a book in which he describes a perfect society populated by perfect citizens. He found the arts threatening, sending poets and playwrights out of his ideal republic, or at least censoring their works, especially painting and music. He considered the arts as powerful shapers of character. The only art he would allow was if it served society in increasing the knowledge of the people. Plato's disdain for the arts can be explained in 4 ways. 1. Art is merely imitation. Art of any kind, in Plato's opinion, is inferior copies of ultimate reality. Art is therefore deceptive. The Greek thought of mimesis is the making of something, but Plato defined mimesis as making a copy of the original. He posits that art is thrice removed from reality. A physical chair is the imitation of the essence of a chair in the spiritual realm, and a painting of a chair is a copy of the imitation of the essence of a chair, as seen here in Vincent van Gogh's chair with a pipe. This allows room for deception. 2. Art encourages emotions and passions. Plato's concern with art was not artistic in foundation, but rather philosophical, and we have to consider that he understood the arts as he was once part of this community. Plato believed intellect and rational thought were superior to emotions and desires. He said that art resulted in emotional arousal and swayed people from finding the ultimate truth. Poetry, drama, music, and visual arts are not governed by rationality, but rather passion. If we consider this ancient Greek figure, he is in the process of dying, shown in his posture, the wound in his side, and the broken sword lying next to him. This sculpture captured a moment of death, inevitably evoking emotions in the viewer. But Plato said that death was not the end. 3. Art results in immorality. Greek poets like Homer, no, not that Homer, the other Homer, showed gods and heroes with moral weaknesses and sometimes savagery. These poetries include flawed characters of gods, the problem of judgment, and conflict with divine goodness. The goal of prohibiting them is cultivating both physically strong and mentally courageous young people to ultimately produce philosopher kings. Plato claimed that the free exercise of the artistic imagination is a danger to the state, as poets and dramatists were likely to tell stories that made people feel dissatisfied with their lot in life. 4. Art is an untruthful representation of reality. Artists imitate imperfect objects of the world rather than referencing the essence of thought and things. Plato believed that this removal from the true form allowed room for misrepresentation of truth. Our physical realm is subjective, whereas the ideal realm is objective. Plato states that certain arts are dangerous as they corrupt us by leading us further away from truth and rationale. In René Magritte's This Is Not a Pipe, Magritte undermined the metaphysical connection assumed by Plato that held between words and things by using the word not in his work. The role of the senses in Plato's theory. We can only answer this question if we accurately know what reality is. Our senses are responsible for the kind of perception of reality we have, but senses are very fallible. If you put a pencil in water, it appears to be bent. The earth appears to be flat. The reason magic tricks are magic tricks is because they take advantage of the fallibility of our senses. It's only through continual reasoning, experimentation, and deduction that we minimize the error in how we perceive the world, or as Plato suggested, dialectics. As you are watching this presentation, photons are bouncing off the screen, hitting the cone receptors in your eyes, producing electrical crackles in your brain. But do you experience electrical crackles, or do you experience color and images? Do you attach meaning to the sensory input? Yes, you do. Our reality, as much as it is governed by what sensory input we receive, is also a painting of our mind soul. So what you put on a canvas or a screen is not only a painting, but a painting of a painting. It is rightly said, art is thrice removed from reality, in that It is the removal through the perception of the artist, the removal due to the restricted talent, and then the removal due to the way it is beheld. Let us consider the impact that Plato's theory of forms has had on visual art. The Renaissance was a time of rebirth and expansion. It was a period between the 14th and 16th century that devalued medieval practices as it favored the new era that drew inspiration from the Greek and Roman traditions of thought and antiquity. It placed high value on knowledge and personal responsibility. Art during this time was known for its realistic scenery, linear perspective, and its innovative light and dark shadowing, known as chiaroscuro. This reflects the desire to connect with Plato's theory of the forms in art in order to mimic true forms as closely as possible. The Renaissance began as a literary movement, with the texts of antiquity being discovered, such as Plato's writings, and was quickly picked up by the visual arts. Masaccio's The Holy Trinity is the earliest surviving painting to use linear perspective to accurately represent an architectural space. The realism of this painted chapel's depth would have impressed viewers at the time, similar to how 3D movies do today. Leonardo da Vinci was the quintessential Renaissance man. He was skilled as an artist, scientist, and architect. His interest in the essence of forms such as beauty and his love of learning and the ideals of antiquity led him to create breathtaking works. Da Vinci was not a mere artist, but an intellect, aiming to bring truth to the viewer. Raphael decorated the walls of the Catholic Pope's library in the Vatican, one of which features the School of Athens, demonstrating linear perspective and realistic depictions of buildings, crowded with philosophers such as Plato and Aristotle. These works seeked perfection in form and attempted to depict truth, encouraging accumulation of knowledge and self-control by depicting great thinkers such as Plato and offering them up as heroes. The Enlightenment. The 18th century was known as the Age of Reason, defined as the period of rigorous scientific, political, and philosophical discourse. 300 years ago, the cities of Pompeii and Herculaneum were uncovered by archaeologists. They found many sculptures and paintings and artifacts from everyday life, almost perfectly preserved. It was a discovery of enlightenment, a world of order and beauty. It was influential in providing the visual means to express the progress of the age. It was looking backwards to look forward, as within the Renaissance. Realism, beauty, and simpler symmetry of Greek and Roman arts served as inspiration for artists and architects. These artists became known as the neoclassicists, neo being Greek for new. Neoclassical artists believe art could civilize, reform, and transform society with a moralizing message as a reflection of the Enlightenment that was taking place in the political and social arenas of the time. This echoes the teachings of Plato. Art had to have a moral purpose. The artist had to be a philosopher and have no other guide except the torch of reason. The function of art was to make virtue attractive and vice repugnant. Remember that vices or undesirables don't exist in the world of forms. The same truth that guides the pen of the philosopher should govern the brush of the artist. The artist Jacques-Louis David actually visited the ruins of Herculaneum, which was an eye-opening experience for him. Here, in his Death of Socrates, David depicts the philosopher's dedication to philosophy, painting the defiant moment where Socrates chooses death above escape and a life without philosophy and ideas. David is mimicking Plato's reverence of Socrates and educating the citizens. Now we come to modern art. Modernism saw the effects of industrialization, capitalism, and as a consequence of both, consumerism. Combined with the atrocities of war and the Spanish flu, left the world tainted, doubting everything including reality. There was a rejection in academic tradition that started in the 19th century. Artists were experimenting wildly and broadly, both adopting and declining previous theories of art. This is evident in each movement categorized under modernism, and there is a lot of them. The subject of mimesis becomes an important influence in the modern art. Impressionists used the style of broken brushstrokes to paint the effect of sunlight in the ways that one observes it in nature. They gave high priority to the effects over attention to detail. This was to avoid just recreating same subject of nature and give the artist perception. Claude Monet depicts his deceased wife and Camille Monet on her deathbed, creating an emotional piece of work. In this work, death has the final word. The modern arts expressed a spiritual response to the change in life conditions of that era. Surrealism art is well known for its appealing images. In surrealist artworks, both dreams and things happening or existing in the physical world are portrayed. Surrealists work in fields such as literature, sculpture, poetry, and films, connecting the spiritual world with the physical. Postmodernism. The previous 3 centuries held strict guidelines on how and what an artist can depict. In the 20th century, writers, theorists, and subsequently artists began rejecting all of the rules, including Plato's. All truth was relative. Postmodernism focused on simplification, collage, performance art, and the destruction of the barrier between high and low art. Simplification is seen in the works of Ellsworth Kelly, who juxtaposed very simple shapes with each other to create dynamic compositions. Robert Rauschenberg made collages where he assembled objects and non-traditional materials together to create pieces that commented on the times. Carolee Schneemann was known for her performance works that shocked the audience. Her work was mainly about the body, sexuality, and gender. Andy Warhol appropriated well-known products and people. Appropriation is using pre-existing objects or images with little transformation of the original to create new works of art. The postmodernists exchanged Plato for Derrida, Foucault, and Bas, and many more. They were seeking truth and meaning in the physical world, in grammar, in mass-produced, infinitely mimicked products and forms. The mind-soul was negated in this era, rendered subjective. Atheism populated, as Friedrich Nietzsche's proclamation, "God is dead," a widely misunderstood claim, became reality. There was a dismissal of a realm beyond, accepting only the physical world as beginning and end. Plato's teacher, Socrates, said in his book Apology that the artists are among the worst interpreters of their own work, that they create without understanding on the wings of inspiration. Plato's teachings were revered in the pre-modern eras like Renaissance and Enlightenment, but questioned and even rejected in the modern and postmodern time. We now find ourselves in a meta-crisis, a meaning and mental health crisis, to which we require an adjusted worldview. Metamodernism accepts progress, hierarchy, sincerity, spirituality, and development. The meta in metamodernism comes from the ancient Greek word metaxis, used by Plato and Plotinus to capture the sense of transcendence. In the case of metamodernism, this means transcending modernity and postmodernity. The question is, have we left the cave?